Overnight, Thailand's opposition warns the new government will bring little change. Aung San Suu Kyi wants an inquiry into a mob attack on her car. And the last bodies recovered from a plane wreckage in India. Good evening, Rosemary Church with Australia Television News. Thailand's opposition has warned that the country's new coalition government is virtually the same as the one which sparked a crisis of confidence. But Evan Williams reports that key coalition leaders are already trying to ease business concerns, stressing their appointment of a respected economic manager and pledging a policy of non-interference.
Opposition Democrats leader Chun Lik Pai says Thailand has to accept 4 of the 6 parties are the same that were in the last government that caused the crisis of faith. If politicians pay to enter parliament, they will look for reimbursements, he says, referring to claims of widespread vote buying. The coalition does have an aggressive new leadership and is bringing in new economic managers. Their chief is already issuing messages of non-interference and openness, but even he says he would have preferred the Democrats as partners and vows to tackle corruption and government overspending. That's the right message for investors, but with an early plunge in share values, business leaders are waiting to assess the strength and restraint of the coalition's economic team and cabinet.
One of Japan's leading bureaucrats has resigned for his alleged involvement in a bribery scandal. Peter McCutcheon reports the Health and Welfare Deputy Minister is accused of receiving favours from a nursing home construction company.
Nobuharu Okumitsu admitted he accepted a new car from the company, which in turn received generous subsidies from the government. Meanwhile, a former Health Ministry official and head of the construction company have been arrested on related bribery charges. It's another blow to the reputation of Japan's Health and Welfare Ministry, already under pressure for alleged negligence in allowing HIV-tainted blood products to be sold to haemophiliacs.
Burma's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has accused the military regime of failing to investigate an attack on her car by a mob she claims had government approval.
The Nobel Peace Prize winner said the crowd formed around her suddenly on November 9, within an area tightly controlled by security forces. Ms Suu Kyi said members of the crowd used rocks and iron bars to batter her car and car windows, as riot police stood by and did nothing. Ms Suu Kyi claims the mob belonged to the Union Solidarity and Development Association, a front organisation for the military government or State Law and Order Restoration Council. Ms Suu Kyi was released from 6 years house arrest in July last year, and harassment of her National League for Democracy has increased markedly over the past 6 months. Burma's military regime, meanwhile, is attempting to improve its tarnished international image with the launch of a Visit Myanmar campaign. Aung San Suu Kyi is among those who've attacked the promotion, saying any money from tourism only helps to prop up the ruling military junta.
We feel that to support Visit Myanmar is tantamount to supporting the status quo in Burma, and the status quo in Burma is such that it should not be accepted or supported, because it is a situation where a lot of us are subjected to a lot of repression, where there is no rule of law, where there is no justice, and unless there is justice, there can be no peace.
Indonesia's Supreme Court has reimposed a 4-year jail term on an independent trade union leader. Mukhtar Pakpahan was already in custody facing subversion charges in relation to riots in Jakarta in July. From the Indonesian capital, Michael Maher reports.
In a surprise decision late last year, Indonesia's Supreme Court overturned the jail term Mukhtar Pakpahan was given by a lower court for allegedly organising a workers' riot in the Sumatran city of Medan. The independent trade union leader remained free until July of this year, when he was arrested on charges of subversion following the Jakarta riots, which were sparked by the toppling of opposition leader Megawati Sukarno Putri. Mr Pakpahan is still awaiting trial on the subversion charge, but in the meantime the Supreme Court has done an about-face and reimposed the 4-year jail term it had earlier overturned. Mukhtar Pakpahan's arrest has sparked a string of protests both in Indonesia as well as overseas.
Indonesia's President Suharto has announced the country's general elections will be held on May the 29th next year. Only 3 state-recognised political parties are allowed to take part in the elections, and despite recent anti-government riots, the ruling Golkar party is expected to win again. In India, the bodies of the last 2 victims of last week's worst ever mid-air collision have been recovered from the wreckage of a Saudi Airlines jumbo jet near New Delhi. The Saudi jumbo, with 312 people aboard, crashed a week ago after colliding with a Kazakh cargo plane carrying 37 people.
The cause of the crash is still not known, but the Kazakhstan government has rejected suggestions the English language skills of the pilots of the Kazakh cargo plane might have been a factor. Kazakhstan's acting director of civil aviation has dismissed reports the Russian pilots couldn't speak English.
I want to clarify that regarding that pilots of Kazakhstan, they know English as much as necessary for radio communication between aircraft and ground, airports or other services. It's more than necessary. They were qualified.
The flight data and cockpit voice recorders from both planes were recovered the day after the crash, but they've been sealed while an Indian judge organises his investigation into the accident. Mr. Salimov, who heads a 15-member Kazakh team helping the investigation, says the Indian investigation team will decide where the information from the black boxes will be decoded. However, he's proposing they be decoded in Moscow in the presence of both Indian and Saudi officials.
Protests are continuing in India over the staging of the Miss World Beauty contest in the subcontinent. Police detained up to 2,000 demonstrators from one protest in Bangalore. Activists from the All India Democratic Association led the protest against the beauty contest. Demonstrators attempted to march on the hotel where the 89 beauty contest participants are staying. A scuffle broke out when police intervened. Protesters said they were against the contest because it gave women the message that only their faces and bodies were important. The brother-in-law of Cambodia's second Prime Minister has been shot dead on a Phnom Penh street. The assassination comes amid rising tension between Cambodia's 2 ruling parties.
Witnesses say Kov Samut was shot 6 times by an assassin on the back of a motorcycle as he left a breakfast restaurant and got into his car earlier today. Police are investigating the broad daylight attack but will not comment on motive or possible suspects, saying it's too early. Samut, 41, was a senior Interior Ministry official and the brother-in-law of Cambodia's powerful second Prime Minister Hun Sen. Assassinations like this are not uncommon in Cambodia, but there's no indication yet if the killing was political or personal. It does come as tensions between the 2 ruling parties reaches a new peak, as both vie for influence with substantial Khmer Rouge breakaway units and jockey for position ahead of the next election.
Next week's Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit will focus world attention on the host nation, the Philippines, and of particular interest will be the country's economy. Analysts say the Philippines is the fastest emerging market in the region.
The changing skyline of Manila's financial district is an indication the country's economy is finally on its way to recovery. Economic analysts say 20 years of martial law imposed by former dictator Ferdinand Marcos in 1972 seriously damaged the Filipino economy. However, recovery is underway thanks to President Fidel Ramos and his predecessor, Corazon Aquino. Reforms made by President Ramos have attracted overseas investment and brought a new mood of confidence.
Some of the best managed companies in Southeast Asia are found in the Philippines. And given the political stability and the reform program and the accelerating growth of the country, this is the only Southeast Asian economy forecast to have accelerating GDP growth in the next 3 years.
For years, the image of the Philippines was synonymous with a garbage dump called Smoky Mountain. Many of Manila's poor lived there, sorting through the garbage for things they could sell. Today, the dump is gone, with resettlement housing being built in its place. The change in the appearance of what used to be Smoky Mountain may be the most significant indicator of economic recovery. But there are other signs Filipinos are enjoying improved lifestyles brought about by the steady growth and stability of the economy. A recent appliance fair conducted by a major bank generated sales far above expectations.
United States President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary have arrived in Australia en route to the APEC conference in the Philippines. For the next 2 days, the President will undertake official duties in Canberra and Sydney before a few days' holiday.
The first glimpse. A little late, the Clintons arrived to a small but enthusiastic welcome at Sydney Airport. Yesterday, Bill Clinton phoned John Howard about a falling Russian space probe. Tonight, there was time for humour. And after the formalities were done, Bill Clinton was exactly as officials had predicted. He was spontaneous. The White House press corps is unsure of exactly what to expect on the 5-day visit, but certain of at least one thing.
Golf he will. The president loves to golf.
This is a treat. This is a bonus. This is kind of the payoff for having endured the last 4 months of the presidential campaign.
Even though they arrived late, it's an early start in the morning for the Clintons when they head for Canberra. The Prime Minister and US President will hold talks ahead of a joint press conference. Then Bill Clinton will deliver an address at a joint sitting at Federal Parliament. The press conference and speech to be broadcast live by the ABC. In the far north, the residents of Port Douglas can scarcely wait, even if all the security is a little off-putting.
I don't mind having Bill and the family out for a barbie, but I don't all these heavy Marines.
They've been trimming, painting and grooming for days, especially Barry McGinn, owner of a pub called the White House.
For a little town like Port Douglas, this is very exciting, very exciting.
The Clintons head north for 2 days' rest on Thursday night.
In the United States, a senior CIA official has been charged with spying for the Russians. 46-year-old Harold Nicholson, who was also a deputy bureau chief in Malaysia, was caught in Washington as he was about to board a plane to leave the country.
For the second time in 3 years, a CIA officer taken into custody, charged with being a double agent. Harold Nicholson was arrested as he was about to leave America to rendezvous with Russian contacts.
There's no greater betrayal of our nation.
The 16-year career spy made $140,000 in cash during the past 2 years. He was caught when he gave irregular answers on a routine lie detector test.
A search of Nicholson's office revealed a cache of highly classified CIA documents concerning Russian military preparedness, Russian intelligence capabilities, and other matters that did not relate to his CIA duties.
The only other US double agent to be arrested in recent years is Audrey James. Unlike Ames, Nicholson's betrayal is not believed to have cost lives.
But it seems unlikely that the damage he caused in any way approaches that done by Ames.
The Nicholson arrest is a product of reforms instituted by the CIA after the embarrassment it suffered over the Ames case. It also confirms that despite the end of the Cold War, the Americans and the Russians are still as suspicious of each other as ever.
It makes clear that foreign intelligence services continue to threaten our nation.
Today's case was adjourned to allow Nicholson time to find a lawyer. If convicted, he faces life imprisonment.
There's been a major fire in the Channel Tunnel between Britain and France, with more than 30 people taken to hospital. Although there were no fatalities, passengers and crew members suffered smoke inhalation as the fumes spread. They were evacuated to the French side as scores of firemen from both countries battled the blaze. The freight shuttle halted deep inside the 56-kilometre tunnel after the fire was discovered. It's the first emergency in the undersea rail link since the tunnel opened 2 years ago. An Australian Supreme Court has been told the gunman accused of the Port Arthur massacre has still given no reason for his killing spree. Graphic details of the April massacre were presented in court on the first day of Martin Bryant's sentencing hearing.
Tight security surrounded Martin Bryant's sentencing hearing as people queued to see the court proceedings. About 80 relatives of the 35 people Bryant killed attended, some in a separate room linked by video. They heard Director of Public Prosecutions Damien Bugg outline the Crown's case of how Bryant carried out his massacre. The 29-year-old sat smiling and laughing, his hair now cropped short. On April 28, the Crown says Bryant left his Hobart home with 2 semi-automatic rifles, handcuffs, rope and a hunting knife. He went to the Seascape guest house at Port Arthur. Neighbours heard shots and the Crown claims owners Sally and David Martin were Bryant's first victims. Bryant went to the Broad Arrow Cafe where after eating lunch he pulled an AR-15 semi-automatic out of a sports bag and began shooting. Describing the act as slaughter, Mr Bugg told how Bryant was aiming shots at people's heads, not saying anything, laughing in an aggressive way. There is absolutely no doubt as to his intent or desire to cause maximum carnage. In 1.5 minutes, Bryant fired 29 shots and killed 20 people. An Asian tourist lived to tell how he confronted death. Bryant aimed the gun at him, pulled the trigger, but the magazine was empty. Mr Bugg told the court Bryant had not given any reason for why he killed 35 people and wounded 19 others. A camera was allowed into Bryant's special cell at Risdon Prison today. The Crown hopes it's where he'll spend life imprisonment with no parole. A victim's impact statement will be presented to the court tomorrow before the defence is given a chance to offer a plea of mitigation.